What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Built to Ball podcast. I'm T. Baker. This week, the Big East Conference signed a multi-year deal with ESPN. Let's get into what this means for women's hoops. What's up, y'all? It was a big week in women's hoops for the Big East. This week, ESPN and the Big East announced a partnership that's a rekindling of sorts of their relationship, a 6-year deal that will cover several Big East women's basketball games, some men's basketball games, and the Olympic sports in the conference on ESPN Plus for the next several years. And this is a big deal for the conference because it adds a level of visibility that, frankly, was not super available on Flow Hoops. I don't know about you, but I was getting kind of tired of using a friend's Flow Hoops login or not getting access to the games I want. It just wasn't a platform that is super accessible. And of course, ESPN is a super accessible platform. People have access to it. It's one of the biggest brand names in sports. So it's a big step for the Big East that they signed this media rights deal. Earlier this week, I spoke to the commissioner of the Big East, Val Ackerman, just a little bit about kind of what it means for the conference and what they're looking forward to out of this partnership. And I'll get into that a little bit and just talk about the overall media coverage landscapes for women's hoops. So it's helpful to think back a little bit onto the past year, which included the Big East signing a deal with several different partners: TNT Sports, Fox Sports, NBC Sports. This happened just about a year ago, June 27th of last year. And this is kind of like the major primary deal for both broadcast and streaming coverage of the Big East. It includes, of course, coverage on Fox Sports, which has been a partner for years. So that's Fox, FS1, FS2. It's expanding to NBC Sports, which is NBC, and its streaming platform partner Peacock, as well as TNT Sports, which is also broadcast and streaming television. So this agreement, allows for more national coverage of the Big East, and this hasn't traditionally been a problem on the men's side, but more so on the women's side. This features 65 additional women's hoops games next year across linear or broadcast television and streaming. And it's just a major win for the Big East that this happened last year. We knew this was coming starting in this upcoming season, 2025, 2026. But what it really does is just allow for there to be a significant boost in women's hoops coverage. Again, 65 additionally games nationally broadcast. When I spoke to Val Ackerman of the Big East, she's the commissioner of the Big East, she just kind of emphasized the way that this is intended to really boost the brands in the Big East. We're entering a different era of college sports where revenue sharing is going to be way more significant. And programs around the country are looking for ways to increase revenue through their conferences, television rights deals. So this is a big win. And in a basketball-centric conference, none of these media rights are shared with football programs. So it's all going to men's and women's basketball primarily, and then the other Olympic sports that are on university campuses. So big win last year that was announced. But what happened earlier this week is that ESPN and the Big East have now signed a multi-year digital rights partnership, which goes for the same period of time. So this upcoming season, 2025-26, up through 2030 and 2031. And what this does is allow for a streaming complement to the national broadcast game. So in the way that Flow Hoops kind of covered the outstanding games that weren't on broadcast television last year, ESPN Plus will do this now, and it'll cover every single regular season game for Big East women's basketball that's not sort of covered on the other platform. So it fills that gap, and it means that every game this season can be watched either on Fox, NBC, TNT, or ESPN Plus, which is just a big boost for the conference. And it sets it up, really nicely to compete with some of these larger conferences that have their own television networks that are bringing in revenue from, media rights deals, partnerships, individual channels, like the ACC network is part of ESPN. But this again is incredibly impactful for women's hoops, especially because it allows for revenue sharing at universities that don't have football. So I think this is a big step for the Big East. What, as someone who kind of likes to look back at the history of the game, this is a partnership that has existed before. So in 1980, the Big East was brand new. ESPN was brand new, and they partnered. ESPN needed to fill some slots, and the Big East was happy to do that. And of course, ESPN has evolved today into a major sports partner. Isn't just a regional network anymore, and the Big East isn't just a regional basketball network anymore. It has national appeal. It's grown its brand. So that partnership in 1980 was significant on both sides of the ball, if you will. And up until 2013, that partnership remained in place. And that's when, the conference realignment significantly impacted the Big East. It's where, several teams left to other conferences. Football sort of split off into the American Conference, which, as someone who covers UConn women's basketball, was just sad to see them compete in a conference where they were clearly overmatched, where they were clearly overmatching other teams, and the Big East regional rivalries that we came to love. Did fizzle out a little bit, but over time, steadily, that's rebuilt. So, you had the Catholic 7 schools that decided to keep the naming rights in 2013 of the Big East, and they were able to kind of reform. That's when you added Creighton and Butler and Xavier, and then eventually UConn was re-added, and that's the conference that we know today. So I think there's a lot of sort of symbolism in the fact that Big East was one of the major partners that ESPN took on in its early days, and now in this new era of sports, with revenue sharing, where media rights deals, television deals are more important than ever, these two entities are partnering again. So I'm really looking forward to it. And one thing that I spoke with Val Ackerman about, again, the commissioner of the Big East, is just the significance of this deal for her as someone who has, been part of the women's basketball ecosystem for decades at this point. She was the founding president of the WNBA. And so in 1996, that's when the media rights deal was signed with ESPN and the WNBA. And she harkened back to that time. She mentioned that, for her, adding the Big East to the ESPN lineup of women's hoops is significant. It allows their product to get more visibility, and it aligns it with other significant brands and products around women's basketball. So you'll see here on Val's page, I'm sharing it with folks watching on YouTube, that she has really presided over the conference since 2013 when it came back. So that, again, that 2013 decision where the 7 Big East schools, DePaul, Georgetown, Marquette, Providence, St. John's, Seton Hall, and Villanova were the Catholic 7. They chose to separate from the Big East Conference, were joined by Butler, Creighton, and Xavier. And then again, UConn came back effective July 1, 2020. So she's been at the helm since the conference has been in this new era of some call it the new Big East or the reconfigured Big East. So, she moved the offices from Providence, unfortunately, because that's where I live. Would have been nice to have them around here, to New York City, but that's a significant move for them. And they also leverage every year for the men's basketball tournament, Madison Square Garden. So there's a big platform. There's significant following for the Big East Conference as a brand, and she has presided over that rebirth of sorts. So she was really excited about this ESPN deal. She mentioned that not only does it, set them up in this immediate term to compete, to bring in revenue, to, offer as a recruiting tool for players, women's basketball players, that, 65 games a year are going to be on broadcast television. The rest of your games are going to be streamable on ESPN Plus. These are things that recruits care about, and they also know that revenue is beginning. So while the conference doesn't dictate where the revenue goes, each school gets to independently make decisions about, okay, based on the revenue that the conference is bringing in from TV and from things like units, by the way. Units are payments made to schools based on how far they go in the NCAA tournament. And this past NCAA tournament was the first time that units were awarded for women's basketball. And so there's a unit awarded, and I think the value is around $150,000 on the women's basketball side. per game one in the NCAA tournament. So you get one for qualifying, and then UConn, managed to get an additional unit for every game for their participation all the way to the national championship. Creighton also made it, so they brought in units. So there's these different revenue streams that are coming in, and again, can't emphasize this enough. There's no football funding that needs to happen. There's no revenue sharing that needs to happen with football teams at these member institutions. So the majority of the funds that are coming in through revenue sharing opportunities are going to be going to men's and women's basketball. So I'm going to be interested in the coming years to see how this impacts the landscape of recruiting in the Big East, what it means for rev sharing, and ultimately how the Big East can continue to build its brand amongst the changing landscape of women's college hoops. So I'm looking forward to it, and I think it's a big step. Again, just this upcoming season, we're going to see way more women's hoops on broadcast television, and then we're just not going to have to fumble around with flow hoops anymore to find the regular season games. And all the conference tournament games are going to be televised as well. So, I think that the concerns that some folks had about, will the Big East be able to compete in this new era? It's not a Power Four conference. Some of those are quelled for me just because, the Big East is a basketball centric conference. That's where the podcast name came from. It was built to ball. It was built for basketball. It wasn't built for other sports at the time. It's evolved to include other sports, but now, football is the main driver of revenue at most campuses. The Big East doesn't worry about that. So while it might be less overall revenue because, those Power Four conferences are signing very lucrative TV deals that include football, it's maybe less revenue overall, but more percentage of that revenue gets to go to men's and women's basketball. And I think that just says a lot for the future of the game and the continued growth of the conference. So I'm here for it. Just wanted to jump on today and talk a little bit about this media rights deal. Feel free to interact with me in the comments. Would love to hear your thoughts. I wrote a piece over at The Next about this, and I'll drop that in the show notes just so you can see my writing, see a little bit more about my interview with Val. And thanks for tuning in. This has been Built to Ball.